Hey guys, I'm Mike and I make stuff. Admittedly, we hadn't made a whole lot. We made a crate a couple of videos ago, but I hope you guys will bear with me. I've been covering a lot of things that I think are really important to understand before we really start getting into it in earnest. And I think today is one of those videos. Did you guys know, fun fact, 100% of people that do DIY, fix things, repair things, they end up screwing something up because they made some kind of a goofy mistake. Well, today I'm going to go over a few things to consider that'll keep you from being one of them. Check it out and let's get into it. If you guys are enjoying the content that I'm giving out, if you felt like I earned your subscription, I'd really appreciate it. Number one is trying to get things done with cheap tools. And I should make a clarification here. I don't necessarily, when I say cheap, I don't mean inexpensive. There's a distinct difference between the two. Inexpensive tools are always great. Cheap tools, probably not so much. I know of countless people that are upset with the state of their tools, upset with their performance, because they bought something that was of inferior quality, or they bought something that just wasn't worth the price point. Now, when you hear these guys on and on about this tool brand is great, this one's awful, don't ever buy this one's a piece of crap, I think there's something that some people don't know. For example, you got Stanley Black & Decker. They own Craftsman, they own DeWalt, they own Stanley, of course, they own Black & Decker, of course. I'll put a little chart up here so you guys can see it. Then you got Tectonic Industries, which is TTI. They own Milwaukee, they own Ryobi, they own Dust Devil, they own Hoover, they own all of these different companies. But basically, you're looking at about a handful of companies that make all of the tool brands that you're talking about. So when they say one brand or another, okay, it used to be that buying a particular brand was a sign of quality or a sign of value, or everybody had their preferences. Now, it's just marketing. Sorry. There's a lot of tool snobs that are probably getting mad when I said that. Having said that, this is where I suggest do your best to try to find used tools if you're on a budget. Used tools, especially from stuff 30, 40, 50 years ago and older. A lot of those tools were made with quality. A lot of those tools were made with durability, and they were made to last. And the part that's important to us, they're made with the ability for you to repair and upkeep them. So if you have a particular price point or you got a particular budget you need to stay within for a tool, that's perfectly okay. Don't shy away from the used stuff. You got places like flea markets, garage sales, pawn shops, used tool stores. I'm lucky enough to have one here in town where I live. Keeping an eye on places like Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, auctions. All of these can be wonderful sources for a lot of really great tools that are of incredible quality that, for one reason or another, just went by the wayside. Unfortunately, it's a sad fact that kind of what I'm trying to teach you guys is a bit of a dying breed. No pun intended, but unfortunately and sadly it's true. A lot of the guys and girls that were into what I'm into, they're passing away, they're getting old. And that means a lot of their collections are sadly falling into the hands of people that have no idea what they're looking at. That means something good for you, because you can educate yourself on these older tools. You can pay attention to what quality looks like. You'll be able to pick up a lot of this stuff sometimes for pennies on the dollar, simply because the family doesn't want to mess with it anymore, or they have no idea what they're looking at, or they just want to liquidate it, get the estate taken care of. It's a sad, unfortunate fact, but it is a fact nonetheless. Now, at the time that I make this video, I think this is particularly relevant because the newly suggested import tariffs that could be applied to foreign-made tools could probably increase the cost of them significantly. I've seen speculation where some say that certain tools and related items are going to increase 25 to 50%. And that not only applies to import tools, that applies to things that they say made in the USA on. It's surprising the number of components that are comprising that device that are being imported from overseas. So those components are going to have the increase in price, which at the end of the day is going to translate into an increase in price for us. If you have the budget to do so, invest in something that is of particular quality. So what I'm talking about is you can spot sometimes when a tool is manufactured with planned intentional obsolescence built into it from the very beginning. When you look at it prior to purchase, you may see that something, well, let me get an example. Hold on. Alright, so I'm going to show you guys this. I'm not condemning this brand. It's a little something I got from Amazon. If you guys want to see what it does, give me just a second. It's made to hook onto an air compressor to help you drive nails out of things like pallets and stuff. But the thing that I find so interesting about this is that there are very few things inherently that I know I can take apart and repair. I picked this up at a pinch because I really needed one. But other than some screws here so that I can get to the pneumatic air ram and my connection, all the rest of this is a solid piece of aluminum. There's no way for me to get in here. I couldn't fix any component in here if I wanted to. So I operate this tool with the understanding that someday it could eventually break and there's not a lot I can do about it. And then you got guys like this fella. All right, this is a Craftsman jigsaw. Actually, back then they called them saber saws. But what I want to point out here is really important. You see at the end there, we've got screws everywhere. We've got screws running down the side of the handle. We can do whatever we need to. This is readily able to be serviced. It's ready to be worked on. It's ready to be maintained, and it's ready to go. And we're going to do that later on. We'll talk about how we ended up with the jigsaw here in just a minute. But when you're buying these tools, when you're buying anything really, look for signs that somebody left an opening for you to go in there and work on it if you have to. That's a pretty good indicator that whatever's inside has a good chance for you to be able to help repair, maintain. So that's where I go when I start looking at tools. Plus, this old skill saw, $20. You guys got some old tools laying around? Let's know in the comments. Talk about what you got. I have this old drill press that I've been working with forever. It's a brand they don't make anymore. It's called Walker Turner. This thing's been around since the 1930s. It's going on 100 years old. Yes. I still haven't sorted the drill bits. Shut up. Which brings me to that next point I was talking about, the preventative maintenance. Let's get into that saber saw and I'll show you what I mean. Now, have I done anything to make this place presentable? Absolutely not. All you can see from this angle is the top of my raggedy workbench and my fat belly. But as I get ready to tear into this, I thought I'd talk to you more about the second point, which is ignoring preventative maintenance. So many people, myself included, have ignored a tool, continue to move on like nothing was going on, didn't do any of the preventative maintenance whatsoever, and then we got the nerve to be upset when the thing craps the bed. That drill would have been just fine if I'd have done some preventive maintenance, and if I would have picked a make and model and a particular tool, that would have worked really great for me. So let me show you how I'm going to get into this. I already have ran this just in the sake of transparency. I'm going to let you guys know. I already ran it, and I know that the biggest piece of maintenance I need to do is I'm going to add some grease to the inner workings of this old 67 Craftsman saber saw. Regular maintenance is what's going to be key for keeping these old guys in shape. I promise you, this saw is going to outlive me. I'm absolutely 100% certain. When you're selecting things, look for tools and machines that have readily accessible parts, kind of like this. With the things that probably have replaceable components. It's another advantage of having older tools, is that a lot of times other iterations of that exact same tool are laying somewhere else and are there for parts should you need them to revive a machine or a tool that you're working with and working on. Some, I actually keep extra copies of a tool whenever I see it, even if it's broken, just because, let's say if this handle breaks, then I can cannibalize it off of another tool and continue to keep things running. All right, we're wide open here. You guys see this? What we got is a pair of linear guides that sit on these eccentric bushings here. And these are ran by a couple of gears that reciprocates my saw blade up and down, up and down, up and down. Now, as I'm doing this, you guys can ask, why are there two gears? Why are there two sets like this? Well, because if one was moving up and down, it would cause a lot of vibration as the balance of this would get shook up and down. So they added this one sort of like a counterweight so that they move against one another and they negate each other's effects. Really good handy feature that they added in just to save the person's hand who's going to be using it. I mean, especially back in those days, if it was a tradesman or a contractor who was going to be using this for an extensive amount of time, all day, 8, 10, 12 hours, he's going to be awful thankful that that counterweight's in there, because otherwise his hand would be numb by lunch. The good news is, as I inspect this grease is still very viscous, still holding itself together. It hasn't broke down. All of these components are moving really free. They're good to go. All of this seems to be moving just fine. I don't see any metal shavings or any cracked metal or anything that indicates to me that this thing has been damaged. We just need to replace the grease that's in it or add more so that it continues to do what it needs to do. Slather this in while I keep talking. Some of the other things I try to avoid is maybe you get a new tool and you can see some fasteners. You can see how they assembled it and how it was put together, but it's all put together with things like riveted housings, proprietary screws, things that it's pretty clear they went out of their way to make sure it wasn't readily able or easy for you to get in there and do any repairs or any maintenance. A lot of times, especially if it's something like a sealed body that's been riveted together, or in the instance of my my nail remover that I showed you, I call those a closed system. And they're completely locked out. You're not going to be able to do anything with it. Now let's talk to the devil's advocates, because there are out there. And thank you up to this point for not becoming trolls while you're doing so. If you have anything constructive to say, I'm all ears. But we all know the unfortunate reality that is trolls. And those with a differing opinion would say, well, Mike, that's great. It's cool that you're keeping those old tools out of the landfill. And they usually don't argue with the durability, but they say that the newer tools have so many safety features. They have so many different things, guards and other things that keep us safe that we didn't know about when they made that tool. That's true. That's absolutely true. Those tools may lack some of the safety features that the newer stuff has. But this is going to be a hot take. I argue that those older tools were more than capable. And people operated them for decades without incident. The key lies in proper safety, proper knowledge of the tool and its operation. I contend that the unfortunate truth of things is that tools adapted these new safety features, and they've been incorporated because overall in our society we've seen a decrease in the knowledge of proper operation of some of these tools. There's a running joke that if you bought a car 60 or 70 years ago, and this part isn't a joke, this is absolutely true, the owner's manual would have directions on how to do things like do a valve job. They'd show you how to work on the car to keep it running for as long as possible. You look at an instruction manual nowadays on a car and they tell you that it's dangerous to drink the battery acid. I say that to say there is an overall decrease in our understanding of proper operation of a machine. And that is unfortunately due to laziness and complacency in consumers. That's why we experience that decline. By focusing on learning proper operation, you're going to avoid a lot of those problems and you're going to ensure your safety. And just like that, our saw runs like brand new again. Now, if you guys would like to see me do any more repairs or any more maintenance or help you figure out how to work on a particular tool, let me know in the comments. Reach out to me. We'll get it figured out. But the first step is knowing which ones to get. The third thing that always seems to kick us all in the butt, for those of us who have been doing DIY, and for those of you who are experienced, I mean, share your experiences. Let them know. It's not a unique scenario, and it's really, at the end of the day, it's a learning experience, and there's really nothing to be ashamed of. I tell you guys readily, I'm the first one to make mistakes all the time. One of the big ones that we do is failing to plan ahead, not doing the proper research before you get ready to start a project. I remember when I was young, and I was first starting out, somebody had asked me to help them redo their kitchen. They wanted it nice and pretty. I made the most bonehead mistake ever, and it didn't seem like I did at the time. But the lady of the house clearly said to me, I want the cabinets in the kitchen the same color as the walls. And the wall color had extended out into the dining room. It was a really pretty color. And I got some leftover paint out in the garage. All you gotta do is, just go grab that. You won't have to do any paint matching. It'll be great. And I did that, and we spent several hours. We repainted all the cabinets. Came out looking incredible. He was very thankful. She was very thankful, and I went to the house. It wasn't too long after that where it was, I need you to come look at these cabinets. There's a problem. But at the end of the day, I didn't stop them, and they never prepared for the fact that we should have done a little more research before we went in there and started painting. See, the paint was interior wall paint, which is fine. But what we didn't know at the time is that you needed a cabinet-specific paint for kitchens. Which now, being older and wiser, I understand completely. I mean, you've got a kitchen, and that's got an oven, it's got a sink, it's got steam coming off of pans, it's got microwaves, it's got grease, it's got all kinds of things, and those don't play very well with paint. So sure enough, after a while it looks splotchy in places where there may have been grease we didn't completely get soaked up and saturated out of the wood, or it was chipping, it was peeling, it was bubbling up in places where there were temperature differentials. It was pretty ugly. And we could have avoided a lot of that if we would have just used a finish that was more tolerant to the temperature and humidity extremes in a kitchen environment. So when you're tackling any of these projects, I tell you, there is a lot to be said for the spirit of figure it out while you're going. I do that a lot. But at the same time, would you build a house without a blueprint? So my advice there is whether you're tackling a DIY project, if you're going to redo a kitchen, if you're going to set up a smart home, if you're going to tear apart a computer to replace things, whatever it ends up being, do as much research as you can do. Reach out to as many people as you possibly can, and try to gather up as much knowledge as you need beforehand so that you enter into what you're doing confident, capable, and knowledgeable about what's going on. Sure, there's going to be things that pop up along the way. You don't really know what's going to happen, and you don't know what you're going to find. I could have just as easily opened up that saber saw, that jigsaw, and found that half of the parts were shredded. But I did. Thankfully, this time that worked out great. Just make sure that you're in a good place and you're thoroughly researched so that everything about what you're about to do goes off safely. Number 4. This is the reverse of that same coin where I talked about try to find machines, tools, and items that are easily reparable. People that throw away things that could have been repaired. When I was a kid, I'm glad that people were like that. And this was 40, 50 years ago. Even then, intentional obsolescence had already taken its hold on many, many people. And I remember specifically lawnmowers. I remember my daddy would hear somebody wailing and moaning about the lawnmower. They got to go buy another one because they can't get it started. Because for some, it doesn't matter what they do. They make sure they got gas in, the air filter's clean. It just won't. No matter how many times they pull that cord, it's just not going to start. And my father would say something like, "Well, if you're going to throw it away, do you mind if I had it?" And then me and him give it to him, or he gives him $5, $10, whatever it is. He takes it to the house, and I guarantee the vast majority of the time it was as simple as a carburetor clean. A few dollars and a little bit of elbow grease later, and it was running like that. Many of those exact same people who were lamenting about the fact they need to go get a new lawnmower, well, then they'd realize, wait a minute, you got a bunch of old lawnmowers. Probably save a little money if I bought one from you. And then they'd up buying a lawnmower from the same guy who just took their old one and is about to sell to somebody else. Besides the environmental concerns, doing things like keeping it out of the landfill, saving money, that's obviously a good one. But the other thing that I liked, that I only learned years later, was that every time he did that, he learned something else. He learned a common problem with a lawnmower that he could repair later on. He learned another type of troubleshooting, another diagnostic. And slowly but surely, he developed a mindset to be able to repair a lot of things. And I'm not ashamed to say, I can't imagine that there weren't several times that ended up paying a light bill. Another thing is, if something is in fact broken, that doesn't mean it's entirely broken. The whole thing isn't destroyed. You can just as easily take that broken item and learn so much from it when you dismantle it. You can understand more about its inner workings. You can figure out what it does, what pushes what energizes what, how does this turn that. There's so many of those instances that you could pick up and learn. Not to mention the components that were previously part of that broken machine. You could easily repurpose those into something else. And before you know it, well, you end up with a junk pile of spare parts everywhere. But seriously though, before you throw something away, take a moment and research if it can be repaired. It's not just about saving money. It's building confidence and a skill set. And it's really useful. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. I'd say number 5 is understanding the importance of precision when it's necessary. What I mean is, not that big. Now, those of you who have done any DIY, you already know. If you got a wood shop or something like that, then somebody will pop up, hey, you know what, can you make a little shelf for me? Or can you make a dresser? Sure, what dimensions would you like? Oh, about like this, about like this, about like this. Those are all well and good, but getting precision measurements and standard dimensions can help quite a bit. Woodworkers, carpenters, house framers, metal fab workers, we've all had this saying for as long as I can recall. Measure twice and cut once. Meaning double check what you're doing and make sure that you're doing the right thing before you make a permanent change to something like making a cut. Now, the level of precision that you'll need is quite variable depending on what you're up to. If you're building a piece of furniture and it's 1/8 of an inch longer than what original dimensions said, that's really not going to bother anybody. Conversely, if you're working on machining or you're doing CAD design to 3D print something, 1/10 of a millimeter could be the difference between something fitting right and something not fitting. So depending on what you're up to, your measuring equipment is kind of important. You may want to do some research there, or you can happily ask in the comments. I'll answer anything that I can answer about the degree of precision that you may need, particularly for the endeavor that you're going into. Some may be as simple as a good old-fashioned tape measure. Some may require a bit more precision, so that you start getting into precision rules. Others focus entirely on relative measurement, so that you end up with things like this combination square where I can transfer the same dimension to different places all over. And when you really start getting in there, for those of the guys that are hobby machinists or they work on auto mechanics and they know that precision is key, and you start doing something that they like to call chasing zeros, then you start getting into higher things like, digital micrometers, calipers, very, very high-end metrology. But choose the applicable method of precision that is suitable for what you're up to so that you get a consistent result each time. So I hope that some of this was able to help you. If you found anything useful in what I had to say today, leave a like, subscribe if you feel like I earned it. Leave me a comment, let me know what helped you out, what didn't help, or what I can give you that'll help you more. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. Guess what I'm going to do? Finally, sort these drill bits. I keep saying that. Hold me to it. Take care, guys. See you next video.